Do we normally get hit? Wait, if I watch Piers Morgan, does that usually you? Oh, that's so horribly. Don't look at that.
Destiny, you would vote for Joe Biden's urn with his ashes inside.
I would. I did say that. If they brought his urn up, I would vote for it. Hell yes, I did.
Rather than Donald Trump.
Listen, if they wheel that dude out and he's got an IV drip in him, I'm still voting for him over Donald Trump.
President Joe Biden has achieved...
Do you normally get... I don't know if you normally get subscriber hit for this. I don't remember.
That for many years seemed impossible. He appears to have unified America, not behind a policy, an ideology, or a dream.
Oh, wait, you guys are...
But behind the blunt truth that he's no longer fit to serve. A massive 72% of voters now believe he does not have the mental or cognitive health to serve as president. A 12-point rise since his
Comments
debate
don't like
disaster.
you? Good. I'm glad.
The attempts to defend him
don't like me.
look increasingly desperate. Now more so, the misdeflection from Nancy Pelosi.
This is an opportunity for Joe Biden to go out there and show he has the stamina and the rest. And by the way, while the press, and for some reason they don't, there are healthcare professionals who think that Trump has dementia, that his connection, his thoughts do not go together. Not only that he just lies, he doesn't even know the truth. So if we're just talking about mental acuity, let's be fair about it.
Yes, let's be fair about it. And to be perfectly fair about it, Nancy Pelosi probably isn't the one who should be adjudicating on mental acuity. And the calls for Biden to stand down are in fact coming mostly now from his own supporters. Thomas Friedman, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and the president's longtime friend, wrote in the New York Times, Joe Biden, a good man and a good president, has no business running for re-election. If he insists on running and loses to Trump, Biden and his family and his staff and party members who enabled him will not be able to show their faces. That's a Biden fan, a Biden friend. And that latter point is a crucial one. Many Americans are now justifiably asking, well, who exactly is running the country? Conservative commentators have long been dismissed as conspiracy theorists for arguing that the Democrats will swap out Biden at the last minute and that people like Jill Biden, the First Lady, are unduly influential. But on those points, it turns out they were probably right all along. Well, Dr. Jill's appearance on the cover of the new Vogue magazine is unfortunately timed to say the very least. It makes it look like maybe she's the one who's in charge here. This weekend, the Biden family gathered at Camp David, where they reportedly encouraged the president to keep fighting. This comes after footage emerged of the First Lady leading a seemingly stricken president off stage after debate, a scene that was grimly reminiscent of a nursing home. President Biden shouldn't be listening to his advisors or his son or his wife. The stakes are far too high. But he should now listen to himself.
If I were to run, I think they're going to judge me on my vitality. Can I still run up the steps of Air Force Two? Am I still in good shape? Do I have all my faculties? Am I energetic? I think it's totally legitimate for people to ask those questions. This is for the voters to decide. Take a look. Look at me, see if I have the energy, see if I know what I'm talking about, and make their judgment. I think it's a legitimate thing to be concerned about anyone's age, including mine. I think it's totally legitimate. But I think the best way to make the judgment is to watch me.
Yeah, well, we did. The world watched, and the judgment was clear. In a 90-minute live debate in front of 100 million people around the world, there was nowhere for Joe Biden to hide anymore. The few Democrats still defending him are guilty of the same blinkered cultism they accuse MAGA Republicans of peddling about Trump. And the only voters who truly want Biden to remain the candidate in November's election are the ones who are voting for Donald Trump. Well, joining me now to debate all this is the host of the Michael Knowles Show and reported fascist. I think that's his jokey description, Michael Knowles. Host of the Habituation Room podcast, Francesca Fiorentini. Host of Tommy Lehrer is Fearless and Outkick Tommy Lehrer. And the streamer and commentator, Destiny. Right, Destiny, let me start with you. Are you going to stare down the barrel of that camera and construct any convincing argument that Joe Biden should now remain as the Democrat nominee for this election?
I think the difficult reality is your incumbent advantage is strong, and at this point, it's too late to replace him. So you're kind of stuck with him at this point.
It's not too late, though. There is a mechanism. They can do it. They can ratify it at the convention. It's not too late. And we're going to come to Tommy in a moment, who's been saying for ages is more likely to be Gavin Newsom. I think she was right all along. And actually, I said similar things myself. It's not too late. The question is, are the Democrats, after that absolute horror story of a debate, seriously going to let this guy be the one who allows Trump to get back to the White House? That's the calculation, surely.
I mean, your strongest arguments are Biden's ran against Trump before and won, and Biden's your incumbent. You can say that it's not too late to replace him, that somebody like Gavin Newsom can run for president and he can do just as good as Biden would. But, I mean, people said the same thing, that DeSantis would represent a strong challenge to Trump, and he got absolutely obliterated. It's easy to look at a candidate that hasn't gone through the ringer, that hasn't been tested in a national level election. But who knows if Newsom comes out? There could be one or two little scandals lurking behind the curtains that now we see that gets infinite airtime over the next few months. The reality is that Biden is probably the best shot the Democrats have right now to win.
But do you genuinely believe he should therefore continue and be the nominee?
I think that the Democrats should run the best candidate that they can to defeat Donald Trump. Absolutely,
you keep distancing yourself from this, Destiny. Come on.
Well,
put your head over the parapet. What do you think?
Well, I think that Joe Biden is the best candidate right now, given that he's already beaten Donald Trump in one election. I think that Joe Biden is the best candidate right now to run against Donald Trump.
You think
that beating Donald Trump is really important?
Hang on. Sorry, I don't want to be unfair to you, Destiny, but of all the Democrats in America, how many are there? I mean, tens of millions, right? Of all of them, you think Joe Biden right now, after that debate, is the best candidate the party can produce? Seriously?
I'm sure there are better candidates, but it's not about who the best candidate is. It's about who you know the best candidate is. I'm sure that you could flip a coin and find somebody that might end up performing better. But again, look at how many people have these huge reputations. Look at Cuomo and how he was destroyed after a couple scandals. Like, you have no idea if you take a candidate who looks strong. And I admit, Newsom looks strong. He's amazing on-stage presentation and everything. But who knows if you throw him up that there are just one or two accusations or one or two scandals or one or two things that the American public doesn't know about that now dominates the news cycle for the next few months. And even though he was a strong candidate on paper, like DeSantis, he disappears.
Okay, Tommy Loan, you've been waiting patiently, actually for several years, to say what I think you're about to say, which is that, of course, they should get rid of Biden and try and parachute in somebody like Newsom. I mean, do you feel a bit vindicated by what's been going on?
I feel very vindicated, but I'll also say, Piers, I hope that they run Joe Biden. That would be the easiest contest for Donald Trump to beat, would be Joe Biden.
Right.
So as much as I do believe they're going to select another candidate, I hope that they maintain with Joe Biden. I hope that that's their guy. And if that is the strongest candidate you have in the Democrat Party, that says a lot about the Democrat Party. Last week's debate performance was horrifying. It was horrifying as an American to watch because, like it or not, this guy still represents the United States of America. And as an American, although I didn't vote for Joe Biden and I will never vote for Joe Biden, that is still my president. And our enemies and our allies watched that, and it was horrifying. Not only the mumbles and the bumbles and the losing the train of thought. At one point, Joe Biden said that people are getting raped by their in-laws and their sisters. He had one opportunity to dunk on the issue of abortion, where he really could get the eyes and ears of the American public that's very divided on that issue, and he chose to say that people are getting raped by their sisters. So that was a horrible performance. I think they've got to go with somebody else. And what I think is so interesting here is that of all the names being floated, I'm not hearing Vice President Kamala Harris on the tip of the tongue of any leading Democrat. I'm hearing Gavin Newsom. I'm hearing Gretchen Whitmer. I'm hearing a couple of other names being floated, but nobody's really saying Vice President Kamala Harris, and that's got to sting.
We have a little clip, which is a mashup. There's a much longer version of about 4 minutes of her repeating the same line. This is a little bit of it. Watch this.
What could be, unburdened by what had been.
What can be, unburdened by what has been. What can be, unburdened by what has been. What can be, unburdened by what has been. What can be, unburdened by what has been. What we can see, what we believe can be, unburdened by what has been. What can be, unburdened by what has been. I can imagine what can be and be unburdened by what has been, you know?
I mean, Tommy, you posted that on X. I mean, this goes on for 4 minutes. It's about all she ever says. And there's an irony, because the one thing she would be is burdened by what has gone on before. Because if there's anyone in America or the Democrat Party more unpopular than Joe Biden, it is Kamala Harris.
Yeah, Piers, and that's why they keep jacking up Joe to get him through each and every single day, is because the thought of Kamala Harris terrifies them even more than dementia Joe. She also says things about the passage of time and how it passes. I mean, she has no excuse. She doesn't have cognitive decline or dementia to fall back on. She is just that bad. So I think that's why they've been maintaining Joe for so long. It's because of Kamala. But boy, they're going to have to face that reality sooner than later.
Yeah, Francesca, look, we've talked about this before, but there must be a painful moment right now for a lot of people who are Democrats, right? Where your guy is just clearly has now been exposed as, I would argue, as somebody who's not got a horse in the race, I'm British, I just think has exposed himself as unfit for the highest office in the land. But what do? You know, there are 5 months left to the election. You either allow him to limp on, and I believe if that's the case, get crushed by Trump, or you try and parachute somebody else in, which carries with it, as Destiny was saying, its own risks.
Yeah, no, there's massive risks of replacing Joe Biden. That being said, I do think he should be replaced. And interestingly, Hunter Biden is the one family member that wants Joe Biden to not run again.
Why would anyone listen to him? I mean,
well,
it's
I think it's more I'm just saying
they're
it's
listening
more
to Hunter Biden, the
He
crack
just wants
addict?
a single day without the right on his dick, you know, because they love to spread photos of it and show it on congressional floors. But look, politically, here's where I stand. I wanted Bernie, not Weekend at Bernie's. I think we all need to just lay that out there. I put this squarely at the feet of the Democratic Party. They ran a piss poor candidate in 2016. They ran in 2020, and yes, they did win. There was a trifecta. There was a COVID-19 pandemic going on at the time, and Obama made that call, and everybody fell in line. But is Joe Biden the best candidate this time around? Absolutely not. And I think it is depressing and enraging to millions of Americans who the only person they hate more than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris maybe is Donald Trump, right? Is the fact that you have everything going against Donald Trump, not just the fact that he will pass a national abortion ban, the fact that he wants to implement Project 2025 and abolish the Department of Education.
Here's the problem.
Let me finish.
But that isn't true. He's not said he wants to pass a national abortion ban. So, see, when I hear Democrats do that, it reminds me of Trump's the new Hitler. It's like, why exaggerate? Why go too far? He's never said he wants a national abortion ban.
Pay attention to the news that's happening right now. The far-right takeover of the judicial system in this country is already underway. And just today, they allowed a president to have immunity, total immunity, which means the Jack Smith case
Actually, it
against
wasn't
Donald
total
Trump
immunity. See,
doesn't go forward.
Francesca, look, with respect, again, you're massively exaggerating. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled
go to Project 2025
let me
and tell me
clarify
what it
for
says,
viewers,
Piers.
right? You said they've given him total immunity. They haven't. The Supreme Court ruled that Donald Trump is partially immune from prosecution for actions taken while he was in the White House. They said that while the president's immune from criminal prosecution for official acts taken in office, he is not immune for unofficial acts. Big difference to total immunity. So
Sure,
again, why exaggerate?
There is nothing to exaggerate here. What
You
I'm
just
saying is
did about abortion and immunity.
so he's immune from stealing White House secrets after he leaves the office. Is that what you're saying? It's okay for him
You
to
mean
keep
like Joe
classified
Biden
documents?
did?
Yeah, Joe Biden, in which when he was told, he was like, oh, here you go. Look, I'm not here to defend Joe Biden. You're trying to get on me. All I'm saying is Donald Trump represents a far worse threat to the American people. And Joe Biden's a terrible messenger for his own damn campaign. He can't even articulate the fact that unemployment was at its lowest rate last year.
Yeah,
Since the year 1969.
I agree. He couldn't
the
articulate.
economy is actually doing quite well under Joe Biden.
Of course.
But the guy can't put his mouth around the words.
And he had a
it sucked
perfectly
because-
good attack line on Trump about abortion if he could remember what it was supposed to be. But he couldn't.
Right.
Michael Knowles, let me
Absolutely.
bring Michael. He'll be waiting very patiently. I mean, look, I think what was extraordinary, 65% of people who watched that debate thought Trump was a winner. Trump hasn't seen approval like that as a politician, right? So that showed you how bad it was. And incredibly, 30% of people who watched it thought that Biden won, which just goes to show how deep partisan tribalism runs, right? Because even Joe Biden knows, even Barack Obama said he had a bad night. What happens here? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I have to correct my friend Francesca here, who says the only person that Americans hate more than Biden is Trump. That isn't true. That's why Biden proposed the debate in the first place, is because his numbers just were not strong enough against Trump, and it completely backfired on him. However, I'm with Destiny. I agree that Biden is the best nominee for the Democrats right now. I still don't think he beats Trump, but who else are they going to pick? As we've said, Kamala, no way. Michelle Obama's not going to run, and she's not nearly as popular as people say she is. Gavin Newsom, I don't think that Patrick Bateman plays in Peoria, okay? I don't think Gavin Newsom wins Michigan. I don't think he wins Pennsylvania. Who? Mayor Pete? Who are we going to get? Are we going to dig up Al Gore? Is he going to run? There is no better candidate for them right now. The problem is that Joe Biden also can no longer be the nominee because the entire liberal establishment has just admitted he's not fit for the job. The biggest problem right now for Biden is he has admitted it. You know, we heard in 2020 that his obvious slips and gaffes and memory lapses were just the recurrence of a childhood stutter that had disappeared for the first 47 years of his political career. But there it came roaring back in 2019. And now even Biden is admitting, he says, I don't talk as well as I used to. I don't debate as well as I used to. But doggone it, the one thing I can do is tell the truth, which rings hollow when even CNN had to go on a 3-minute diatribe, a litany of all the lies that he told during that Thursday debate. And not to forget that Joe Biden dropped out of the 1988 presidential race because of dishonesty. So the question now is, if Destiny and I are correct, and he just is the nominee, then how does the New York Times, how does Politico, how does Washington Post, how does the entire liberal establishment campaign for this guy after admitting he's not fit to be president?
Wow. True. Okay. We'll watch the rest of this in a bit when I can bring food up. Let me keep reading. I feel like we're not going to get through all this today. Fuck. All of these are so long. Cringe. Trump asserts a far broader immunity than the limited one we have recognized. He contends that the indictment must be dismissed because the impeachment judgment clause requires the impeachment and Senate conviction precede a president's criminal prosecution. Brief for Petitioner 16. The text of the clause provides little support for such an absolute immunity. It states that an impeachment judgment shall not extend further than to removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the U.S. It then specifies that the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. We know this. The clause both limits the consequences of an impeachment judgment and clarifies that notwithstanding such judgment, subsequent prosecution may proceed. By its own terms, the clause does not address whether and on what conduct a president may be prosecuted if he was never impeached and convicted. Historical evidence likewise lends little support to Trump's position. For example, Justice Story reasoned that none of this really matters as much because this argument was stupid anyway, but we'll go through it, I guess. At least they shoot it down. For example, Justice Story reasoned that without the clause's clarification that indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment may nevertheless follow Senate conviction, it might be matter of extreme doubt whether a second trial for the same offense could be had, either after an acquittal or a conviction in the court of impeachments. James Wilson, who served on the committee that drafted the clause and later as a justice of this court, similarly concluded that acquittal of impeachment charges posed no bar to subsequent prosecution. And contrary to Trump's contention, Alexander Hamilton did not disagree. The Federalist Papers on which Trump relies concerned the checks available against a sitting president. Hamilton noted that unlike the King of Great Britain, the president would be liable to be impeached and removed from office and would afterwards be liable to prosecution and punishment. See also number 77, explaining that the president is at all times liable to impeachment, trial, dismission from office, and to the forfeiture of life and estate by subsequent prosecution. Hamilton did not endorse or even consider whether the impeachment judgment clause immunizes a former president from prosecution. The implication of Trump's theory is that a president who evades impeachment for one reason or another during his term in office can never be held accountable for his criminal acts in the ordinary course of law. So if a president manages to conceal certain crimes throughout his presidency, or if Congress is unable to muster the political will to impeach the president for his crimes, then they must forever remain impervious to prosecution. Impeachment is a political process by which Congress can remove a president who has committed treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Transforming that political process into a necessary step in the enforcement of criminal law finds little support in the text of the Constitution or the structure of our government. I agree with that. I was arguing with Chad earlier when people are saying like, oh, well, I mean, what about impeachment? Or, like you can impeach somebody and make that part, blah, blah. Impeachment has nothing to do with criminal stuff. It's a wholly, impeachment is exclusively a political process. It's only here to remove somebody from office and to prevent them from holding further office. It is not used in lieu of, instead of criminal convictions. They don't deal with the same type of things. They don't have the same penalties. They don't even necessarily deal with the content in the same way. Yeah. B. The government, for its part, takes a similarly broad view, contending that the president enjoys no immunity from criminal prosecution for any action. It maintains this view despite agreeing with much of our analysis. For instance, the government does not dispute that Congress may not criminalize presidential conduct within the president's conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority. Core powers can't be regulated at all, like the pardon power and veto, see blah, blah, blah. And it also accords protection to presidential conduct if subjecting that conduct to generally applicable laws would raise serious constitutional questions regarding the president's authority or cause a possible conflict with the president's constitutional prerogatives. Indeed, the executive branch has long held that view. The Office of Legal Counsel has recognized, for instance, that a federal statute generally prohibiting appointments to any office or duty in any court of persons within certain degrees of consanguinity, oh my God. It's not consanguinity. It's not that. It's consanguity. Consanguinity? Consanguinity? How the fuck do I pronounce this word? Hold on.
Consanguinity.
Consanguinity. Of persons within certain degrees of consanguinity to the judges of such courts would, if applied to the president, infringe his power to appoint federal judges, thereby raising a serious constitutional question. So it viewed such a statute as not applying to the president. Likewise, it has narrowly construed a criminal prohibition on grassroots lobbying to avoid the constitutional issues that would otherwise arise, reasoning that the statute should not be construed to prohibit the president or executive branch agencies from engaging in a general open dialogue with the public on the administration's programs and policies. I just don't like any of this reasoning. Man, I wish I could debate a Supreme Court justice. I'd definitely lose, but this is talking about when laws are in conflict with the direct duties of a president. This isn't talking about whether or not a president is not subject to criminal review. It's just I don't think that any of this analysis is parallel, can be applied in a parallel manner to any of this at all. It just seems wholly ridiculous to me, but I don't know. The government thus broadly agrees that the president's official acts are entitled to some degree of constitutional protection. It's an enumerated power, obviously. And with respect to the allegations in the indictment before us, the government agrees that at least some of the alleged conduct involves official acts, yet the government contends that the president should not be considered immune from prosecution, criminal prosecution, for those official acts. On the government's view, as-applied challenges in the course of the trial suffice to protect Article II interests, and review of a district court's decision on such challenges should be deferred until after trial. If the president is instead immune from prosecution, a district court's denial of immunity would be appealable before trial. C. Mitchell explaining that questions of immunity are reviewable before trial because the essence of immunity is the entitlement not to be subject to the suit. The government asserts that the robust safeguards available in typical criminal proceedings alleviate the need for pretrial review. First, it points to the Justice Department's longstanding commitment to the impartial enforcement of the law, as well as the criminal justice system's further protections, grand juries, a defendant's procedural rights during trial, and the requirements that the government prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. Next, it contends that existing principles of statutory construction and as-applied constitutional challenges adequately address the separation of powers concerns involved in applying generally applicable criminal laws to a president. Finally, the government cites certain defenses that would be available to the president in a particular prosecution, such as the public authority defense or the advice of the attorney general. Yes, those are based arguments. I think all those arguments are based. These safeguards, though important, do not alleviate the need for pretrial review. They fail to address the fact that under our system of separated powers, criminal prohibitions cannot apply to certain presidential conduct to begin with. As we have explained, when the president acts pursuant to his exclusive constitutional powers, Congress cannot, as a structural matter, regulate such actions, and courts cannot review them. I understand that, yes, Congress, the courts cannot review them. And he is at least presumptively immune from prosecution for his other official acts. I feel like here's one thing I wonder if it gets touched on. The issue isn't even... The problem is that we're not talking about Congress limiting presidential power, and we're not even talking about the courts limiting presidential power. What we need is a way to see if the president is exercising that's not presidential power, but pretending that it is. And it feels like this might be, this is definitionally now beyond the review of a court if it is a core power that is exclusively within the executive. So whether or not there was a crime committed in the way that Donald Trump communicates with or threatens or whatever his attorney general, that act is beyond review. Now, if you want to say Congress can't make laws prohibiting powers that are expressly written in the Constitution of the president, sure, that makes sense. Of course. Why would they be able to? President's power should probably come first here. I understand that. But can a court review an action to see if that action was legal or not? I don't know. Are we watching Biden's address to the Supreme Court? Yeah, we will. I don't know. Jesus. What checks and balances are there for justices who make terrible rulings on court cases? Can't you impeach a Supreme Court justice? I don't know what the process is like for that. I think it's happened one time, or maybe never. Wow, hi. Okay. Thank you. Okay. The same presidential conduct agreement, as we have explained, when the president acts pursuant to his exclusive constitutional powers, Congress cannot. Okay, and he is at least presumptively immune from prosecution for his other official actions. Questions about whether the president may be held liable for particular actions consistent with the separation of powers must be addressed at the outset of a proceeding. Even if the president were ultimately not found liable for certain official actions, the possibility of an extended proceeding alone may render him unduly cautious in the discharge of his official duties. Thank you. To the burden of a trial and to the inevitable danger of its outcome would dampen the ardor of all but the most resolute. The Constitution does not tolerate such impediments to the effective functioning of government. As for the government's assurances that prosecutors and grand juries will not permit political or baseless prosecutions from advancing in the first place, those assurances are available to every criminal defendant and fail to account for the president's unique position in the constitutional scheme. We do not ordinarily decline to decide significant constitutional questions based on the government's promises of good faith. See U.S. versus Stevens, blah, blah, blah. We would not uphold an unconstitutional statute merely because the government promised to use it responsibly. Nor do we do so today. I wonder what that... okay. I wonder what that's in reference to, what that court case is about. I actually, you know what? I want to see. I'm curious what they were referring to there. U.S. versus Stevens. U.S. Good luck.
You and Destiny basically agree. That's when you know how bad this situation is.
How does the entire liberal establishment campaign for this guy after admitting
Do you know
he's
how
not
bad
fit
it
to be
is?
president?
When you and Destiny basically agree, that's when you know how bad this situation is, right? I just want to bring in Fox News medical contributor Dr. Mark Siegel quickly. Dr. Mark, great to see you. And the reason I wanted to talk to you was because we've got a clip. This is Biden debating before the 2020 election and Biden debating now. I want you to watch this and just give an assessment of what we think may be happening here.
I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
I just gave $28 billion to our farmers.
Taxpayers' money.
It's what?
Taxpayers' money.
You can see he is 6'5" and only 223 pounds, or 235 pounds. Well, you said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway, that's what you're. Anyway, Just take a look at what he says he is and take a look at what he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. The reason I got my handicap, which when I was vice.
The funniest thing is, I don't even think this was the worst clip of Biden for the debate. I think there were a couple of clips you could choose that were way worse than this. Nobody talks about it because it's a big meme, but I thought the funniest moment was, what did he say? What did Biden say? Like, we went to war with the elderly, or like we eliminated Medicare. He says he said a couple of wildly stupid things.
Vice president down to a 6.
We defeated Medicare? Yeah.
I mean, I play golf off 16, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I would bet $100,000 to a charity of President Biden's choice that I could give him a shot a hole rather than him giving me 10 shots, and I'd still beat him. This idea he was ever a 6 handicapper is ludicrous. But Dr. Mark, there are so many clips that people are comparing to 4 years ago to 8 years ago of Joe Biden in debates, where he sounds previously whip smart, really on it, dynamic, and so on, eloquent, articulate. That person no longer exists. What is likely to be happening here?
I'm glad you used the word likely, because obviously I haven't examined it, but Piers, first of all, everyone out there needs to know that he's going to be the last to know. Any neurologist will tell you he's going to be the last to admit it. Those around him will see him faltering. They'll see him having problems with speech, searching for words, not following a sentence from beginning to end, saying ridiculous things, saying offensive things, getting irritated when he's contended with. That's a sign of growing cognitive impairment. He's going to be the last to admit it. And then his wife steps in and starts speaking for him, reminiscent of Woodrow Wilson, when he couldn't rule the country and his wife was taking instruction and running the country. That was probably the scariest thing of all. I think that there's a lot of risks he has here for dementia. One, he has an irregular heartbeat, and that irregular heartbeat can lead to silent ischemia, silent strokes. He walks with this gait that looks neurologic to a lot of neurologists, that there's a problem with his gait. That goes back to what's going on up here. Does he have fluid on his brain? Some neurologists have said he could have an atypical Parkinson's. He's got something going on. And here's something that none of your expert panel yet said, and they're expert. I love this panel you have. Piers, never mind whether he's going to run or not. Can he be president now?
Right.
He doesn't have cognitive reserve. What happens if we get a phone call in the middle of the night, that famous phone call in the middle of the night? There's a nuclear threat going on. You want this bumbling idiot to actually address that? And of course, you know, Tommy was right. The world leaders are watching this. But how about our own national security?
Yeah. Well, I was struck by the briefing that came out saying, you know what, he's pretty good between like 9 and 4 o'clock, which is why all the clips of him out there speaking, like the next day he was out and sounded pretty different. And I was like, well, that's fine, right to the point that he has to apply his finger to the nuclear trigger at 6 o'clock or 9 o'clock or midnight. I mean, if we get the guy who was on that debate stage at the wrong moment, I wouldn't trust him to run a bath, let alone run a military order.
That's a great point. You know, if he's sundowning, he can't run the country after 6 p.m. And then the White House is saying he has a cold. Well, excuse me, I've had colds and I still can carry a train of thought.
Exactly.
Cold medicine. I take Dayquil sometimes and I'm fine. I can think clearly with Mucinex. I mean, whatever they gave him, if it impairs him to the point where he can't speak clearly or think clearly, he can't run the country.
Mark, is there a mechanism under... If it turned out, for example, that he genuinely has got a deteriorating dementia that is quite aggressive, and this gets medically diagnosed now as a result of this debate, is there a mechanism for his removal that you're aware of from the office of president? I mean, 25th Amendment, does that cover it?
Yes, the 25th Amendment covers it. And to your point, I want to point out that his last physical that he had in February, I have been asking for years now, and Tommy, the same thing. I've been asking for years now for a full assessment. They didn't give it. They danced around it. No MRI scan was listed. A lot of dementias would show up on an MRI, and no formal cognitive testing has been done. I think there could be a demand for that right now. What does his MRI show? If he's impaired, then there would be a case for removing him now.
Yeah, I completely agree. Dr. Mark, always great to have your contribution. Thank you very much indeed. Destiny, you were chuckling there. What were you chuckling about?
The idea that a Republican would demand a full physical assessment from a president when they wouldn't even demand Trump's taxes is hilarious to me. The idea of not being able to answer the call in the middle of the night, I mean, it's already happened. We've had it with Ukraine. We've had it with Israel. Like Donald Trump did not show leadership when Iran attacked Saudi Arabia and he stood by and did nothing. He didn't show leadership when he abandoned our Kurdish allies in Syria for absolutely no reason. Biden has shown leadership, whether you like it or not, whether you like how he's dealt with it or not. He has shown leadership and the ability to bring allies together for Ukraine. He has shown leadership and the ability to force Israel to simultaneously show restraint while still remaining faithful as an ally. So, I mean, like, we can make fun of a debate performance all you want, but we can compare the legislative records of both presidents and we can compare their actions in office.
You can, but here's the problem. You
Yeah.
can, but here's the problem with that, is that it's just not cutting through. There's no doubt Biden's had a number of wins as president. No doubt at all. There's no doubt that comparative to most of the rest of the world, the US economy is purring along quite nicely.
Bullshit, and Dusty knows it. See ya forever. Bye.
But his approval rating is at 37%. And after that debate, this issue of his own ability to function physically and mentally is now the only thing anyone's going to talk about for the next 5 months. He was incapable, when it really mattered, of articulating to the American people what his successes were, what his policy wins had been, what his attack lines against Trump were going to be, and why he should be re-elected. He could, I mean, honestly, I watched the whole thing at 7 in the morning.
I understand that, but
hang on. I watched the whole thing at 7 in the morning in the UK until 8:30. I had a lot of coffee. I was about as alert as a human being could be. I barely understood anything Biden said in the entire 90 minutes. And by contrast, I've known Trump since 2006 very well. I've watched him at close quarters when I did Celebrity Apprentice for 3 hours a night across the boardroom, night after night after night, until, and modesty prevents me from going about this too much, until I won. But at the end of it, I had 100 hours of watching Trump. He's pretty much the same guy. You may hate him, you may hate the trash that comes out of his mouth, all those things. But in terms of his actual performance, Trump on that debate stage the other night, in fact, if anything, it was the most restrained I'd ever seen him. Because even he could tell the guy next to him was just melting down. So, Destiny, there's the problem.
Did you figure out what a black job is, Piers, after watching him? Did you guys figure out what a black job is?
I'm going to come to you in a moment for your analysis of what we think a black job is. But let me just get Destiny. That's what I think the problem is, right? The problem is that.
I understand what you're saying, okay? As somebody who spent the last 8 years cutting their teeth doing debate, that's what I do, is political debate. All I've heard every single time is debate doesn't matter. It's not that important. Now all of a sudden that's the most important role.
It does when it's that bad.
Why are we talking? What about the immunity for criminal actions that Donald Trump just secured in front of the Supreme Court?
American people.
Idea that,
well, again,
it's an insane thing that what we're talking about is Biden's debate performance over the legal requests that Donald Trump is making.
Yes, but Destiny,
but that's the problem. That's what we're focused on.
But
this is a problem. I agree.
But Destiny, right there is the problem, is that people are only talking about it. So remember, before the debate, 2/3 of all Democrat voters wanted Biden to stand aside because they were worried he was too old. What do you think they think now? No one's changing their mind on that. If anything, I'd be amazed if it's not 90%. And that's the problem. You've got so many things to attack Trump about, but nobody wants to hear it. When has Trump ever been in a debate where the next day the headlines weren't all about him? It's never happened. But now the only thing that anyone will look for with Biden in the next 5 months is him showing further evidence of mental and physical decline. Let me bring in Tommy. This is going to be...
All right.
Nearly 4 years ago, my predecessor...
For the White House, where President Biden is speaking.
You face moments when you need the courage to exercise the full power of the presidency. You also face moments where you need the wisdom to respect the limits of the power of the office of the presidency. This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America.
Why do you look so unnatural while you aren't talking and have to look at the camera? Everybody looks weird. You're just staring at me because you're used to watching my stream where I'm not just staring at the camera the whole time. If you stare at any of the individual people here, you look really fucking weird just looking at the camera and doing nothing. I can't tell how autistic most of you are in chat. You're like, oh, you look so weird just looking at the camera. Yeah, that's what everybody does. That's what you do on these shows. You stare at the camera and you wait for your turn to talk. If you sit and stare at anybody, look at fucking Tommy Lauren for the entirety of the fucking... Or look at fucking Michael Knowles over here.
Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. With today's Supreme Court decision on presidential immunity, that fundamentally changed. For all practical purposes, today's decision almost certainly means that there are virtually no limits on what a president can do. This is a fundamentally new principle, and it's a dangerous precedent, because the power of the office will no longer be constrained by the law, even including the Supreme Court of the United States. The only limits will be self-imposed by the president alone. This decision today has continued the court's attack in recent years on a wide range of long-established legal principles in our nation, from gutting voting rights and civil rights, to taking away women's right to choose, to today's decision that undermines the rule of law of this nation. Nearly 4 years ago, my predecessor sent a violent mob to the U.S. Capitol to stop the peaceful transfer of power. We all saw it with our own eyes. We sat there and watched it happen that day. Attack on the police, the ransacking of the Capitol, a mob literally hunting down the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, gallows erected to hang the Vice President, Mike Pence. I think it's fair to say it's one of the darkest days in the history of America. Now the man who sent that mob to the U.S. Capitol is facing potential criminal conviction for what happened that day. And the American people deserve to have an answer in the courts before the upcoming election. The public has a right to know the answer about what happened on January 6th before they are asked to vote again this year. Now, because of today's decision, that is highly, highly unlikely. It's a terrible disservice to the people of this nation. So now the American people have to do what the courts should have been willing to do, but will not. The American people have to render a judgment about Donald Trump's behavior. The American people must decide whether Donald Trump's assault on our democracy on January 6th makes him unfit for public office in the highest office in the land. The American people must decide if Trump's embrace of violence to preserve his power is acceptable. Perhaps most importantly, the American people must decide if they want to entrust the president once again, the presidency, to Donald Trump, now knowing he'll be even more emboldened to do whatever he pleases whenever he wants to do it. You know, at the outset of our nation, it was the character of George Washington, our first president, that defined the presidency. He believed power was limited, not absolute. And that power always resides with the people, always. Now, over 200 years later, with today's Supreme Court decision, once again, it'll depend on the character of the men and women who hold that presidency that are going to define the limits of the power of the presidency, because the law will no longer do it. I know I will respect the limits of the presidential powers I have for 3.5 years, but any president, including Donald Trump, will now be free to ignore the law. I concur with Justice Sotomayor's dissent today. Here's what she said. She said, in every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. End of quote. So should the American people dissent. I dissent. May God bless you all, and may God help preserve our democracy. Thank you. May God protect our children.
Let's now bring in CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang as we watch the president after his remarks. Weijia, the first public remarks.
Jeez. Bloop, bloop. Might be a 12 IQ hypothetical, but what would stop Trump other than political consequences from ordering live rounds on protesters and then him pardoning everyone that obeys? I mean, theoretically, I guess nothing, huh? As long as they don't get caught by the states. When do you think the president should be immune from challenges in the court of law? I don't know. Maybe it's like his... I'm not sure. I'm sure we could etch out some things. I don't know. I'm not sure if he should ever be immune from criminal prosecution, even in court powers. I'm not sure. I don't know. But as broad as it is right now, it's insane. But There's a lot of misunderstanding of the Supreme Court's ruling in the presidential immunity case. We created this infographic to explain. Oh, cute. What? Yeah? Mm-hmm. Y'all may not realize this, but for the first time in a very long time, America's allies are proud to be allied to the USA. The last few years have actually been huge here in the Pacific and also in Europe and even Africa to some extent. I don't even know which administration you're referring to. I don't know if any allies are proud to be American allies right now, regardless of whether or not Biden is currently president. I just think the fact that we have these huge swings back and forth, I think 2016 probably shook the world in terms of what the U.S. was capable of putting up as a chief executive.
So let's break this down. The overturning of Roe. For over 50 years, the Supreme Court ruled that no elected official in this country could have a say about the life of the unborn, the rights of the unborn, until Roe was repealed. There's nothing in the Constitution, Trey, that says you have a right to an abortion. This was a judicially created fiat called the right of privacy that was made up from whole cloth. There's no specific...
You mean like a presumptive immunity thing that was just made up from nothing?
Mention of abortion in the Constitution, but liberal judges created a right to abortion that doesn't exist. Conservative justices turned this issue back over to the people. The Roberts Court, with some exception, has been the most constitutionally sound conservative court in my lifetime. Thank you, President Trump, for giving us constitutionally sound conservative judges on your watch, and the Democrats, my friend, will stack this court if they get the House, the Senate, and the White House. They will obliterate the conservative majority we worked for 50 years to create. So remember that when you vote.
Okay. Okay. Shouldn't conservatives be wildly against this? People are generally like for a thing if it helps their guy, and they're against a thing if it hurts their guy. That's generally it. Same thing with this. There's no exception here. Okay, what am I looking for? iPad. Do you think people will be for or against it after Biden executes Trump in a public square? They wouldn't. If a Democrat exercises in any possible way whatsoever, conservatives would lose their fucking minds.